Pete Hegseth is just so truly pathetic. It is difficult to do the hierarchy of horrible Trump officials, sometimes figure out who is the most destructive, who is the most dangerous, but the dumbest. It's easily Pete Hegseth. This is a guy who likes to talk tough, to puff out his chest, but he's not actually doing anything. Pete Hegseth is insistent upon the fact that getting rid of the woke ideology that was rampant in the Pentagon is making Americans safer as we go to war and put ourselves in harm's way. But if there is one thing that Pete Hegseth is clearly actually scared of, it's not Americans being hurt. It's his image and his ego being damaged, which is why he is threatening reporters and kicking them out of the Pentagon because he wanted a photo that is humiliating to Hegseth in its broader context hidden. And it has everything to do with the war that him and Donald Trump are illegally waging right now. And that's where I want to start with Senator Chris Murphy calling out the real reason behind it, which shows Donald Trump and Hegseth's weakness.
What is the reason, if the nuclear program isn't the reason, as poor Ted Cruz, I never thought I'd put those three words together, is over there talking about nukes? And we know that the intelligence did not suggest that an attack was imminent from Iran. What is left? Why are we at war with Iran?
Great question. Yeah, great question. I mean, the simplest explanation, might be the one that they gave 24 hours in, that they've kind of tried to backtrack since then, which is that Israel made us do it. That Bibi decided on this timeline, Netanyahu decided he wanted to attack, and he convinced Trump to join him by scaring Trump into believing that U.S. assets in the region would be at risk, and so Trump was better off just joining Netanyahu. I hope that isn't the full explanation, but you're right. As we are now hearing that the nuclear program is not part of their targeting campaign, as we're now more confident that even harder line leadership is taking hold, as the Strait of Hormuz is still being shut down, even as we get their Navy, what's left as the explanation? It might just be that Israel forced our hand. And how weak does that make the United States look? How weak are we if our allies can force us into wars of choice that are bad for U.S. national security interests?
When you talk about an oil Armageddon, what tools, if this was a sort of functioning administration, what would the collaborative effort be like to deal with an energy Armageddon? And let's stipulate they are not. They don't seem to be on the same page on much of anything.
Well, that's kind of asking, after you drop an egg on the ground, what's your plan for reassembling it perfectly into its previous form?
We are going to war for Israel and to cover up the Epstein files. It's not because we've gotten woke out of the Pentagon or we're not fighting in a politically correct manner anymore. When Pete Hegseth says that, it's because he wants you distracted from the fact that they killed schoolgirls in Iran. There's nothing not politically correct about that. It's just a war crime. You can't macho and we hate the blue-haired liberal, whatever manifestation of something that doesn't exist your way out of this. Republicans are constantly talking about how they're victim to and overcoming a reality that doesn't exist. There wasn't a politically correct war that we couldn't win. There were wars that were started by Republican presidents that Republicans wouldn't get out of. What are you talking about? Joe Biden got us out of a war and you wouldn't stop complaining about it and said it was a problem. And now Pete Hegseth is insisting that we have a real enemy. It's apparently woke, but it's funny considering the photo that he just kicked a reporter out of the Pentagon for showing.
And we lost our way. We became the woke department, but not anymore. Right now, I'm looking out at a sea of Americans who made a choice.
So Pete Hegseth says the great trouble of previous administrations was that we were too woke. It was the woke department. And he also talked about how he's a neocon in recovery. He used to think that we needed endless wars, we needed regime change, and now he doesn't believe that except for when Donald Trump asked him to believe in regime change. Then he's all over it. But what does Pete Hegseth really clearly focus on? The guy spending millions of dollars on shrimp and crab and lobster and tomahawk steaks and ice cream machines and donuts and the makeup studio. What is Pete really focused on? I guess his own PR. That is what Hegseth is after, and that is what was exploded and exposed in a new TMZ of all places story that just shows how ridiculous Hegseth is. TMZ reports that unflattering Pete Hegseth pictures reportedly resulted in officials telling several photographers not to come back to the Pentagon. Photographers were allowed in the room during the briefing, but the Washington Post reports photos they took of Secretary Hegseth upset Department of Defense officials. According to the Washington Post, citing two anonymous officials, photographers were banned from briefings on March 4th and March 10th because they took photos like this of Pete Hegseth. This image right here is what's driving him so crazy. In honor of our drunken Secretary of Defense, I will first take a sip before I say, what the hell? Seriously, Pete? You're mad about a photo of you? What are we doing? Seriously, what are we doing at this point? Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, Donald Trump admitting that we're going to war with Iran because Israel has demanded it. Because either Donald Trump is stupid enough to be brought into the war that Bibi Netanyahu has been begging for his entire adult life. That's one option. Option two is that Miriam Adelson and the other Israeli billionaires who bought Donald Trump the presidency once again have literally made this an exchange. And something is happening behind the scenes. He's getting even more money, or he just promised them when he sold out the American people in exchange for the money from Israeli billionaires. The third option also relates to another reason we could have gone to war. Israel probably has some of that Epstein information that Donald Trump doesn't want to come out. The connections between Epstein and Mossad are incredibly deep and detailed and well reported. We've talked about it on this show. So there's no reason to believe that Israel wouldn't have information on Donald Trump and his crimes alongside Epstein. So those are three reasons that we're going to war for Israel. It could be any number of them. It could be any combination. It could be all three. It could be more. And Pete Hegseth is worried about how he looks on camera. Is that not the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard in your entire life? We are getting forced into a war by a foreign government that controls ours. We're supposed to be the most powerful country on earth, and the Israeli government is telling Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth what to do. And all the while, the macho guy who talks about getting woke out and being war fighters and tough war fighters is banning photographers from the Pentagon for taking unflattering photos of him. Do you have a preferred side, Pete? Do you have a good side? Do they have to catch you from a certain angle? This is the very censorship that these people constantly complain about. They say they weren't allowed to say anything or do anything. Remember legalized comedy? Well, now you can't take an unflattering photo of Pete Hegseth. You can mock the guy, but apparently you can't take a bad photo of him either. These people whined and begged us to believe that they were oppressed somehow. And now when they have the opportunity to oppress, not only do they do it, but they do it in the dumbest ways possible. Pete Hegseth has been trying to spin this narrative about the media during his time as Secretary of Defense that it is the leaks of the press out of the Pentagon that are responsible for putting Americans in harm's way. Pete talks about leaks as a manifestation of this evil media. They're going after me and they're trying to undermine me and they're putting you in harm's way because they're reporting, they're not busting into locked cabinets, taking highly classified information and posting it. That's what Pete Hegseth does when he's had a couple. It's not reporters at the New York Times or the Washington Post who take a bad photo of Pete who are leading Americans to die. No, that's Donald Trump because he's pledged allegiance to Israel. So Pete Hegseth has been working on this media campaign, this attacking the media campaign, in which he tries to equate reporting about his failures at the Pentagon and the leaks that have been allowed under his watch with those very leaks that take place over Signal because he's such an incompetent guy who's off the sauce. And now reporters who Pete Hegseth already banned en masse from being at the Pentagon are getting kicked out of the building because they take a bad photo of him. The most sensitive information in our government, apparently, are the documents that protect predators and bad pictures of Pete Hegseth. Those are the state secrets of America. Unflattering photos of Pete and information that, if released, would finally bring accountability to criminals, and the president who himself is also a criminal. Those are the documents that we are guarding with the utmost security in this country. I don't know how that can't make anyone upset, especially when this is the guy who's talking about being macho and bringing toughness back to the Pentagon. You're worried about a photo? He installed a makeup studio as one of his first moves. And this was the guy who is supposed to act tough, talk tough, fake pull-ups, workout videos, doing push-ups with the boys. What a loser. Our country is run by the most insecure losers out there. And you know, I unfortunately had the displeasure earlier this week of talking to a Republican. It was terrible. But I wanted to learn more about what's going on in the party right now because everything is in shambles. They said there are two types of Republicans right now. The people who are really getting tired of their grift and are embarrassed by how ridiculous they act, although not embarrassed enough to stop. Funny enough, one of those people is Riley Gaines. No one believes that she believes her own message. She's a transphobe, sure, but she's just trying to cash a check. There are people like her, influencers, creators, Fox personalities, who just repeat lines to get a paycheck, try to get on Trump's good side and elevate themselves. I think JD is like that in many ways. And then the other side of it is just straight up extremists. That's the composition of the Republican Party right now. These people are insecure. They should be socially isolated from the rest of the world. They desperately want friends and attention, and then they run our government and they run it into the ground. And that's sad. That's the state of things. Grifter losers and extremists. That's what the Republican Party is exclusively. That's why people get frustrated. But we're going to keep calling it out on this show. We're not going to let Pete Hegseth censor us. I can promise you that much. Pete Hegseth is not going to be going down to YouTube studios to shut the show down. He's certainly not coming to my apartment. But if you all want to support the work, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video if you stuck around to the end, and drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you.